This video contains discussions of violence, death, and disturbing events. All information is based on public records, police reports, and witness statements. Some details may be difficult for certain viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Everyone mentioned is innocent unless proven guilty. This case remains unsolved. We encourage viewers to do their own research before forming their opinions. Okay, so listen. I need you to stay with me on this one, because this case is one of those where you keep thinking, okay, now it's going to make sense, and it just never does. You think you've got it, and then something else pops up. Wait, what? This is the case of Jerry Stasa. Jerry Bennett Stasa was described by the people who loved him most as a fun-loving man with a big heart. To his fiancée, Christy Horn, he wasn't just a partner, he was her whole world. The two met through a mutual friend about 5 years earlier and began dating not long after. Their relationship grew quickly, and by April of 2015, Jerry proposed. They were planning a beach wedding in Florida, a place Jerry loved more than anything, followed by a honeymoon and then a reception back home with family. Jerry was 35 years old. He lived in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, and had graduated from Cuyahoga Falls High School. He worked at his family's business, Quality Potato Products, where he was deeply involved in daily operations and was being prepared to eventually take over leadership of the company. Friends described Jerry as laid-back, kind, and hard-working, someone who meant the world to many people. He was a devoted Pittsburgh Steelers fan and someone who valued family, loyalty, and the simple things in life. But just 2 weeks before his wedding date, on October 2nd, 2015, everything changed. That Friday afternoon, Jerry was found dead at the family business on Wooster Road North in Barberton, Ohio. A coworker discovered his body after a scheduled delivery was missed. The Summit County medical examiner later ruled Jerry's death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma to the head. Investigators believe Jerry was the only employee working at the time. His wallet, watch, and keys were still on him, ruling out robbery as a motive. Surveillance video showed someone leaving the building, but the person responsible has never been identified. More than 9 years later, Jerry Stasa's case remains unsolved, and the question still remains: who killed Jerry Stasa and why? Jerry was 35 years old. 35. And I don't know why that keeps sticking with me, but it does, because that's not old. That's not someone at the end of their life. That's someone still building. On October 2nd, 2015, police and fire are dispatched to Wooster Road North in Barberton, Ohio, for a call that comes in as a person down. And right away, that phrase alone makes my stomach drop, because person down can mean anything. Sometimes it's medical. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's already too late. And when they arrive, it's Jerry. He's found deceased. And here's the first thing that already bothers me. This isn't brushed off. This isn't treated like, oh, maybe it was natural. Very quickly, this is investigated as a homicide. Not a medical event, not an accident, a homicide. And here we are, years later, and no one has ever been charged with the death of Jerry Stasa. Not arrested, not indicted, nothing. And I remember thinking, how does that happen? Because this case has been reviewed. It's been discussed with prosecutors, both the Barberton Prosecutor's Office and the Summit County Prosecutor's Office. Body camera footage from responding officers was collected and tagged as evidence. This isn't a case that just fell through the cracks, so why is it still sitting here? Now, that same night, after being called in to help with a suspicious deceased man, officers arrive around 8:45 in the evening, and when they get there, the scene is already busy. Patrol officers are there, detectives are there, a BCI crime scene technician is there. Medical examiner investigators are there. So this is serious. Officers stay outside the building until Jerry is transported from the scene. And at one point, a sergeant comes out and briefs them. And that's when it's made clear this is being handled as a homicide. Okay, now before we go any further, I need you to picture the location correctly, because if you don't, the rest of this feels confusing. This was a long, narrow, yellow brick building, 1 story high. It did not sit by itself. There were other businesses on both sides of it. One of those businesses, and remember this, was Treasure Island, a little hole-in-the-wall casino. In front of the building was a 2-story apartment building where Jerry and Jeff lived, each in their own apartments, a few years back. Then, there was a narrow alley separating the business and winding bar. The business Jerry worked at was Quality Potato Products Incorporated. And the important thing here is the entrance. You didn't just walk in from the street. The working entrance was in the back of the building, and you had to get to it through a narrow alley from the road or an alley behind the building where there were two different ways that you could go to get to the building. And that alley, that's where everything happens, because Jerry's car is back there. His vehicle is parked in that alley, directly behind the building. It's unlocked, and the trunk is open. And I'm already pausing here, because why is the trunk open? Was he loading something? Did he step away for a second? Did someone interrupt him? Like, what was happening in that moment? On the front seat of the car, officers see Jerry's Kohl's employee name tag, fast food trash, and his cell phone. An officer tries to check the phone, but it's almost dead. A charger is right there, so he plugs it in. After a brief charge, he can start looking through it. He confirms it's Jerry's phone and leaves it charging longer, telling detectives, "You need to look at this as soon as you can." They search the vehicle for anything tied to what happened, and they find nothing. So already, that feels strange. The car is there, the trunk is open, the phone is there, but nothing obvious explains what happened to Jerry. After Jerry is removed, officers go inside Quality Potato Products Incorporated. Inside, it's basically one large production room, walk-in refrigerators on opposite walls, a processing machine in the center, pallets and boxes of potatoes along the sides. There's a smaller office area with a bathroom that's cluttered and unkept. Toward the back, there's a tow motor, a four-wheel ATV, a guitar in a case, and miscellaneous items. And then there's Jerry. Jerry is found about 6 feet from the open back door, the same door that leads straight into the alley where his car is parked with the trunk open. Between Jerry and that open door is a handcart loaded with bags of potatoes. And officers say it's clear Jerry was working. He was pulling bags from the refrigerator. He was marking them with a marker. He was loading them onto the cart, getting ready to load them into his car. That marker? It's found under his body. And this is where I stop again, because officers say there's splatter on the bags, the walls, and the processing machine, and they believe Jerry was surprised, possibly from behind. But here's the part that really messes with my head. There's no sign of an extended struggle, no evidence of a break-in, no evidence of robbery, and no weapon found in or around the scene. So how does that happen? How does someone get unalived in the middle of their workday, inside their workplace, without a struggle and without a weapon left behind? Officers search the immediate area outside too. Nothing. And this is where things take a turn, because detectives finally get into Jerry's phone. And inside his phone, they find a folder that Jerry created himself. The folder is titled "Jeff Stalking Me," and I remember thinking, that's not something you name lightly. You don't create a folder like that unless you're genuinely worried. Inside that folder are 28 photos and videos. And before I even tell you what's in them, I need to say this clearly. Jeff and Jerry were cousins. So this isn't some random guy Jerry thought was following him. This is family. Jeff also worked part-time at Quality Potato Products. Jeff lived nearby on Worcester Road North. Jeff allegedly had access to a company van, and Jeff had a gold 1999 Oldsmobile. In Jerry's folder, there are photos of that exact vehicle sitting near the business, following him, watching from parking lots. Just there. The license plate comes back to Jeff. There's also a video Jerry recorded himself. He narrates it. He says Jeff has been watching or following him for about 3 to 4 weeks. He says it's about 9:55 in the morning on June 5th, 2015, and points out Jeff's car sitting across from where he works. There are dates on these files from May, June, and even August 13th, 2015, just weeks before Jerry is found deceased. And at this point, I remember thinking, how did this not turn into something sooner? Because Jerry documented this. He saved it. He kept it. And here's another thing. Jeff is also the person who found Jerry that morning. Jeff is also the person who called 911. So detectives start talking among themselves and agreeing that they have serious questions about that call. And here's where the story starts spiraling in like 5 different directions at once. And I remember when I was reading all of this thinking, okay, surely this is where answers start coming. And instead it's like, no, it actually gets messier. Because once detectives see that folder on Jerry's phone, the one titled Jeff Stalking Me, they don't just look at Jeff in isolation anymore. They start pulling at every single thread connected to him. And that's when all these names start coming up, like one after another. And before we go any further, I need to say this again because it matters every single time Jeff's name comes up. Jeff and Jerry were cousins. So this isn't random. This isn't distant. This is family. Okay, so detectives do what they're supposed to do. They go backward before they go forward. They start pulling old reports, and that's when they find the report from 2014 made by Kelly. At the time, Kelly was Jeff's girlfriend. And in that report, she told police that Jeff said a guy she worked with owed him money. Jeff told her he would take care of it. When she asked what that meant, Jeff allegedly told her that the man would no longer walk on this earth. And the name in that report was Jerry. And right there, I'm already like, okay, so this wasn't just some weird vibe Jerry had. There was an actual threat documented years earlier. So detectives go talk to Kelly. Kelly lets them in and tells them she is currently dating Jeff. And they've been together for about 2 years. And I remember thinking, wow, so the same woman who once reported him is now back with him. Kelly tells detectives she was with Jeff earlier that day and met him at Subway the night before. She says Jeff told her he had been at the police station talking with detectives, but he wouldn't tell her what about. Just that a guy he works with got hurt and police had questions. She says Jeff mentioned he could see a monitor from the interview room, but he wouldn't explain what was on it. Detectives then tell her directly, this is a homicide investigation, and Jeff's cousin Jerry was unalived. And Kelly agrees. Yeah, it's strange Jeff didn't tell her that. She starts describing Jeff, and honestly, the picture that forms is not great. She says he's very private, very controlling, and very particular. She says he doesn't like people knowing his business, but at the same time, he wants to know everything about hers. She says he didn't like her son, and that caused serious issues between them. She describes Jeff as a germaphobe, someone who doesn't like touching people or being touched, but also a hoarder. She says when she went to his apartment, she wasn't allowed upstairs. They spent most of their time on the couch watching movies or looking things up on his phone. And then she says something that really stopped me. She says Jeff made her promise never to tell anyone that they had been looking up metal detectors together. Handheld ones, the kind you'd use to look for buried things. They never bought one. They were just looking. But Jeff made her promise not to tell anyone. And I remember thinking, why would that need to be a secret? When detectives bring up the 2014 report again, Kelly remembers making it, but downplays it. She says she thought Jeff was just blowing off steam. She says she was going through a bad divorce at the time and thought she was being overly sensitive. But detectives remind her, Jerry is now deceased, and Jeff is being looked at in a homicide investigation. Kelly says she doesn't know how much money was allegedly owed. She doesn't have details. She says her son pushed her to make the report back then. Okay, now detectives move on to Cecil. Cecil is related to both Jerry and Jeff, and he owns Quality Potato Products Incorporated. So right away, you've got family and business mixed together. And whenever that happens, I always think someone's protecting someone. Cecil tells detectives Jerry worked part-time at the business and part-time at Kohl's. He talks about Jerry like he was a good worker, loyal, dependable, full of ideas. He says Jerry was supposed to take over the business in January of 2016. And that detail keeps hitting me because Jerry wasn't just working there. He was about to run the place. Cecil also tells detectives Jerry was supposed to marry his fiancée Christine on October 13th, 2015, just 11 days after Jerry was found deceased. Cecil explains how the business ran. 6 employees total, 2 high school students, Cecil, his wife Carol, Jerry, and Jeff. Detectives do a walkthrough of the building with Cecil, and this is where things start to feel off. They ask Cecil about an ice chopper tool that Jeff claimed was missing. Cecil looks confused, walks over, and shows them the tool. It was never missing. Detectives ask about weapons, hatchets, axes, anything like that. Cecil says no. He shows them what they actually use, and none of it makes sense as a weapon. Then detectives ask about a missing GPS unit Jeff mentioned. Cecil says he didn't know about that. But then he admits there had been ongoing issues between Jerry and Jeff for 6 to 8 months. He says they were accusing each other of stealing from the business. He describes it like it was just workplace drama. He says he threatened polygraph tests to shut it down. And I remember thinking, okay, but if it was nothing, why did it last that long? Detectives ask Cecil if he knew Jeff was allegedly following Jerry. Cecil says no. They ask if he or Carol ever told Jeff to keep an eye on Jerry. Cecil says no. They ask about Jeff parking across the street. Cecil says Jeff always parked there and walked through the alley. He explains everything away. Cecil confirms Jerry had a previous fall at work but refused medical care. He talks about Jerry being a gifted guitar player and having a black belt in martial arts. And Cecil's tone is very flat, businesslike. There's not a lot of emotion. Then detectives tell Cecil they're investigating Jerry's death as a homicide. Cecil appears shocked, at least on the surface. A few days later, Cecil calls detectives and brings up Christine's ex-boyfriend. He says the relationship was abusive and that the man might resent Jerry, but he doesn't know the man's name and doesn't know if he knew where Jerry worked. And that feels like grasping. Now let's talk about Carol, because this is where the energy just goes cold. Carol sits down with detectives, and from the start, it feels like she does not care to be there. There's no grief. There's no emotion. It's very much, let's get this over with. And what becomes very clear, very fast, is that Carol is far more interested in protecting Jeff than anything else. And context matters here. Jeff lived with Carol and Cecil when he was around 19 years old. They took him in, they helped him, and it really feels like that loyalty never went away. Carol says she doesn't believe Jeff had anything to do with Jerry's death. She refuses a polygraph test without hesitation. She downplays everything detectives bring up. Detectives ask her to walk through the day Jerry was found. Her story shifts. First, she says she called Jeff from her driveway. Then she says she was already halfway there. She says when she arrived, Jeff and police were already there. Detectives ask about phone records. Carol says she remembers one call. Detectives tell her there were multiple calls, including calls that don't line up with her timeline. Carol struggles to explain it. She says she forgot about a second call. Detectives point out a possible third call after the 911 call. Carol can't explain it and doesn't really seem concerned that she can't. Detectives ask if she finds it strange that Jeff never checked on Jerry. Carol says no. She says she wouldn't have either. And that response honestly floored me. Throughout the interview, Carol minimizes Jerry and protects Jeff. When detectives bring up Jeff's past, including an arrest in Cleveland, Carol downplays it. Even when detectives read the actual report, Carol sticks to her belief that Jeff got a raw deal. At one point, she says she wants to leave because she's missing her soap operas. Now, detectives speak with Sandra, Jerry's mother. Sandra tells them Jerry struggled with drinking for years, but had turned his life around. He was happy. He was getting married. He was building a future. She says Jerry was worried about Jeff. She knew about the folder on Jerry's phone. She believes Jerry told Cecil about the alleged stalking and that Cecil would handle it. Sandra says Jerry and Jeff used to be close until Jeff became obsessive. She says Jeff allegedly stole Jerry's guitar and speakers, allegedly broke into his apartment and destroyed his belongings. She also claims Jeff had been in prison before for beating a man and had allegedly stalked a young girl who worked at Panera Bread. Then detectives speak with Christine, Jerry's fiancée. Christine says Jerry told her Jeff wouldn't like that Jerry was taking over the business. She knew about the videos Jerry recorded, but didn't think much of them at the time. She says her ex-boyfriend Justin had nothing to do with Jerry's on a living and didn't know where Jerry worked. Now this is where Chastity comes in. In June of 2018, detectives meet with an ATF agent. The ATF has a man named David in custody. David says he knows Jeff and Chastity. David claims Chastity told him Jeff was dangerous and that Jeff had unalived someone in Barberton in 2015. David says Chastity allegedly told him that she, Jeff, and another man went to the White Front Bar to rob people for substance money. She would lure people out, and Jeff and another male would rob them. David claims Chastity told him that Jerry was the person she lured that day, and that Jeff allegedly beat him until he was deceased. David admits he wasn't there. He didn't witness it. This is what Chastity allegedly told him. And this is where I stop and go. If this was said, why weren't all of these people fully interviewed? Because now we've got more names. Chastity, Eric, Seth, Klassen. Detectives also hear from Margaret, who claims her daughter Mary told her that Jeff, Eric, Seth, and Klassen were all involved. She mentions a shirt with red fluid being burned and a Pittsburgh Steelers hat found at the scene. Mary later denies it and says she only heard rumors. Detectives talk to Alex and Dylan from Sam's Club. They say Jeff talked about unaliving someone and getting away with it, but never clearly admitted to unaliving his cousin. Detectives talk to Sonia, Jeff's ex-wife. Sonia brings letters and claims Jeff talked about unaliving people and inheriting money if Cecil and Carol died. They talk to neighbors. One mentions a light-colored car. They review footage at Treasure Island with TJ. They send evidence to BCI. They extract phones years later. They inspect the building. And after all of that, no charges. And that's where I'm stuck. Because people were named, allegations were made, statements were given, and yet some people were never interviewed. Some threads just stop. And the biggest question of all is still sitting there. Why has no one ever been charged with the death of Jerry Stasa? But after hearing this information, detectives sent the hat back to BCI and specifically requested testing on the inside of the hat, the part that would touch someone's forehead. And after that, there is no clear public result, no explanation, no update. Some people were named in this case, but there is no public record showing that they were fully interviewed or officially ruled out. And that's where the biggest questions live. Why wasn't Eric interviewed? Why wasn't Chastity interviewed? Why weren't polygraph tests requested? Why wasn't DNA collected from everyone named? Why does it feel like this case stops right where it should push forward? Jerry was 35 years old. He was about to get married. He was about to take over a family business. And to this day, no one has ever been charged with his death. And this is where I'm going to pause and say something that a lot of people are already thinking, but don't always feel comfortable saying out loud. Because this isn't just about Jerry anymore. This is now at least the third case in Barberton where people feel like the answer is right there. Written down, documented, named, and yet the case remains unsolved. And when you look at what's in the reports, it's hard not to feel frustrated. Names were given, allegations were made, evidence was collected, and still nothing. So people are left wondering, and these are fair questions. Is this about a lack of resources? Is it about money, not having the funds to do more testing? Is it about not wanting to push further? Is it about being afraid of certain people? Or is it something else entirely? Because from the outside, it feels like the ball keeps getting dropped. And again, I want to be very clear. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm asking why, when cases appear to have information laid out in black and white, they still go nowhere. Why do some people get interviewed and others don't? Why do some allegations get followed up and others stop? Why does it feel like cases stall right when they should move forward? Those are questions the community deserves answers to. Because when cases stay unsolved like this, not once, not twice, but repeatedly, it affects trust, and it leaves families without closure. Jerry deserved better. And so do the other victims whose cases are still waiting for answers. So yeah, this is where Jerry's case stands. And I don't know about you, but after going through all of this, I'm left with way more questions than answers. Because when you really sit with it, when you look at who was named, what was said, and what was never followed up on, it just doesn't feel finished. Jerry should still be here. And his story shouldn't end in silence. If you have any information about the death of Jerry Stasa, you can contact BCI at 855-224-6446. And if you have an unsolved case you would like me to take a look at, or a missing person you would like me to feature, you can email me at acloserlook148@gmail.com. This is a second look, giving victims the voices they deserve. And Jerry deserves answers.